Good morning, my name is Patty Nowak. I'm the owner of Control+M Solutions. Today I'll be discussing how to make sure that your Plex PCN is in good shape for next year. Thank you so much for joining me today. We started these sessions back in March to keep ourselves busy, let you use some downtime from the pandemic, and keep on learning new things. And they've been so popular, we're just keeping them going. Reminder, these sessions are for everybody in the community, not just for our clients. So share them with anybody you'd like. And for this and every session, did you know that when we're done, we post these videos out to our YouTube channel? Our Jill Baton makes sure that after every presentation, these get pushed out to the World Wide Web for everybody at Plex to consume. So if in the future you get invited to a session that you can't attend, well, just wait till the next day and you'll see it online. And if you do watch, please take the time to give us a thumbs up. We do like the kudos. So let's get started. Today we're going to talk about how to get ready for 2021, and I think we can all agree that we're more than ready to put 2020 behind us already. So many of our clients have been affected. Some have gotten busier, some slower, and there's so much uncertainty everywhere. So maybe taking control of this will be a good way for us to look forward to better times, right? The reason I chose to do this presentation now is, although it's a ways out, every fall we get the same questions. Why does my capacity look wacky at the end of the year? Why are my sales order for next year always stuck on December 31 of this year? It's because you need to do a little maintenance in Plex. So we're going to cover some of these basic annual maintenance activities that may or may not need to be performed on your system. We're going to cover all sorts of areas, and it's possible that during the presentation you might get a little lost or confused. That's okay. If you're not using the calendar or module that I'm showing, just hang tight. I'm not going to spend more than 5 minutes on any one topic, so I'll get back to something that is pertinent to you very shortly. Now remember, when I talk about these calendars, not only is it true that you might not use all of them, but your system configuration might use them a little bit differently than ours does. You know the old saying, there are literally millions of ways to configure Plex, and no two implementations are exactly the same. Plex is so flexible. What that does mean is we can't diagnose or predict your system behavior without digging into settings, but no matter how you're configured, keeping these calendars and modules up to date is important. So as always, we suggest testing things in your test system before deploying to live. Let's dive in. There are lots of calendars in Plex, and each of them is specific to a given function. I'm not suggesting that you enable any of these if you're not already using them. This session is just about keeping what you're already using up to date. You're already successfully conducting your business, so your configuration works for you. There's no need to change it. Just spiff up what you're already using. In this session, I'm going to rely on you to understand your configuration and whether or not you use any of these calendars. If you aren't sure if you do, then navigate to the module and take a peek. If it's configured for 2020, you're probably using it, and it makes sense to make sure 2021 and future years are set up as well. Let's start with the simplest and easiest calendar, the shipping calendar. We typically get this question once a year from our new clients. Hey, why are all my next year releases scheduled for December 31st this year? Well, it's one of the shipping calendars. Plex uses 3 different shipping calendars to determine customer release ship dates, but that doesn't mean everyone needs to use all 3 of them. In fact, most people don't. Most of our customers just use the global shipping calendar, but some have to be more specific per customer or even customer address. For example, customer General Electric may only allow shipping on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so we set up a calendar just for them. And the same way label logic works in Plex, there's calendar logic priority too. First, Plex looks for a customer address calendar, and if none are found, it uses the customer calendar. If none there, it goes to the shipping calendar. Customer specific or customer address specific calendars take a few settings to set up. So if this is unfamiliar to you, just focus on the global one. Chances are pretty good your sales department will know if they have customer-specific calendars, but we'll need a reminder to set them up. Not only are these calendars used for scheduling customer releases, they're used for the Create Jobs from Orders module. So if you're using this module, then the shipping calendar is used to get the job due date as well as the release ship date. If you don't update your global shipping calendar for 2021, Plex will just pull the ship date for all 2021 releases into the last shipping date of 2020. That can be a problem for the planning engines, the capacity plan, and the shipping document for sure. So we suggest that you go out and set up that calendar for the next few years, Monday through Friday, and then update it annually to remove your company company holidays each fall. Oddly enough, I got a call just last night from a client who wanted to update their shipping calendar out to 2025. After doing a little digging, we discovered Plex will only let you do mass updates for the next 3 years. After that, it's manual. I know it's a lot of clicking, but it can be done. I'll show you that when we pop into the calendar in a few minutes. If adding more than 3 years at a time is important to you, then put something in the community exchange and email me. I'll ask our clients to support it for you. For those of you who don't know, that's the new ideation space. The other question we often get is this: how do I know if a customer or customer address has their own calendar? If you want to know that, send me an email and we'll send you some VB code that you can run in your PCN that will identify those in your system. Trust me, we've had plenty of clients who have turnover in their sales department, and then the new folks struggle to figure out why their customer releases are scheduling to ship out sooner than needed or on the wrong dates. Most of the time, there's a customer-specific calendar in the system they forgot about. So let's take a peek at how easy this is. I'm going to focus my screens today on UX, but only if Classic behaves the same way. Most of the screens work the same in Classic and UX, but if there's a difference in how the screens behave, or if there's a naming difference, or the buttons just don't work or look the same way between Classic and UX, I'll show both. Truly, the biggest difference in screen names between Classic and UX is UX doesn't use the word list. For example, the Workcenter list in Classic is Workcenters in UX. So it's pretty straightforward. Anyway, let's start out by looking at the shipping calendars in both, because that's how you configure them does look a little bit different. So we're going to open up to Classic, and I'm going to go to my customer list and look at a customer called GE. When you look at the customer record itself, you'll see a white hyperlink up here that says shipping days. These are shipping days that apply to all addresses for the customer General Electric. I'm going to tell my system that Plex only allows shipping on Mondays in the month of August. Once I click update, you'll see little trucks in there. I can also do mass update options. You can see down here though that I only have mass updates to 2023. I'm going to mass update Mondays to allow shipping for the customer General Electric on Mondays. And it's going to tell me that it will purge the current calendar. When I click update here, it's going to ask me if I want to update for the entire year. Once I click in September, you'll see Mondays in there as well. The same functionality is available at the customer address level. It just looks a little bit different. And here I have a green button that says shipping days. And when I click on shipping days for this customer address, you'll note it is not pulling in my Mondays that GE allows. It's a completely separate calendar. I'm going to mass update this calendar for Tuesdays and Thursdays for 2020 and click update. And yes, I do want to do the whole year. And you'll see all Tuesdays and Thursdays are in there. If they say change to Wednesdays and Fridays, I can simply update. Plex will advise me that it is changing the current, it's overriding the current calendar. Remember, if you choose to do this, it's important to update all your customer calendars. So knowing where they all are is important. Let's take a peek at the same thing in Colo, and I'm going to work in live. So you'll notice that my changes that I made in Classic Test don't show up in UX Live. If I were making these changes in Classic Live, they would already be there. I've taken the liberty to go to the GE customer address detail field here, and you can see that my shipping days is functional on my address code of Wisconsin. When I click on that shipping days hyperlink, it looks pretty much the same as it did in the Classic screen, but I use a different button to bring up the mass update. When I bring up this mass update, this is pretty cool because it lets me update multiple years at a time. So I could say for 2021, 2022, and 2023, I want to ship on Mondays and Wednesdays. If I click apply, it's going to purge the current calendar and put these records out for all addresses. I'm not going to do that because this is a test PCN that we use, and if I make a mess out of this, I'll probably cause the folks that work for me to have a little bit more work than they need. One of the nicest features about UX is that I can keep favorites in folders, which means I can have lots of them. So I took the time this morning to get all my favorites together on these folders. You can see my standard shipping calendar ships every day in August and every day in September. For us in the United States, we don't work on Monday the 7th, so we're going to change that not to be a shippable day and click apply. I can also mass update these functions here, and this is where I'm suggesting you go out as far as your system will allow you to go out and set up your Monday through Friday shipping if you typically ship Monday through Friday. That way, all you have to do annually is add your unique holidays. Pretty simple. Let's keep moving on. A little bit about some less frequently used calendars. Now remember, my goal here isn't to recommend or explain each calendar because we only have a short time together. Your system might be configured to use a material requirements work calendar, material requirements transit calendar in UX, or the company work calendar or transit days calendar, which is the classic version. This screen is used to identify the days of the month that a company is open for business for standard shipping and receiving activities. These calendars work with supplier lead times and delivery days to help determine material availability dates in your PCN. You'll have to check your configuration to see which, if any of these, you're using. If you want to know if you're using this, menu search for calendar. Safe to say if it's populated for this year, it should be for next year. So let's take a look at the Material Requirements Work Center calendar in UX. This calendar looks very similar to other calendars, but you'll notice there is not a mass update function. I don't have a lot of customers who use this, and I didn't see a mass update, so I don't think that one is available. There's a holiday calendar that's specific to Plex time and attendance modules. It's called Holiday Maintenance. Some people get thrown by this because it doesn't have the word calendar in it, and it doesn't look like a calendar interface. In Classic, in my PCN, I search for holiday, but in UX, it's called Holiday Detail. It's more a list than a calendar. Let's take a look at that. And I'm going to show you something pretty cool on this. You can see we have a list of holidays here in 2020. When I click on one of these holidays, if you didn't know this, in any date field in Plex, see how it says 9/7? I'm going to hit my plus key, and I know you can't watch my hand hit the keyboard, but when I hit plus, I go up by a day. And when I click the minus key on my keyboard, I go down by a day. If you didn't know that, that's fun, and it works with every calendar in Plex. The Work Center calendar. In my opinion, this is the most important calendar in Plex, but then I'm super passionate about scheduling and accounting, and this can impact both. Remember, the Work Center calendar shows the dates that each Work Center is available to work, and it brings in the shifts applied to those dates plus overrides to calculate job start dates. And in most configurations, those job start dates drive in requirements for subassemblies in PRP and purchase parts in MRP. They can have a real impact on your inventory turnover, which means that even the accountants should care about Work Center calendars. The Work Center calendar can be mass updated for days, and then it pulls in the shifts associated with that Work Center to each of the working days. We'll talk about the days on the next slide, on this slide, and then we'll move to shifts on the next. I often get asked, how frequently do we need to update the Work Center calendar? Well, that depends, and here's what I suggest. If you're using the Plex Infinite Scheduling Engine, update as soon as you know you're going to be off for holidays or shutdowns or for impactful maintenance as soon as possible. With the Infinite Scheduler, Work Center calendar changes only impact jobs that are created or rescheduled after the change is made. Changes do not retroactively calculate job op start dates. So if your ops guy decides on Wednesday that he's 10% over capacity and you just know you can make it down with overtime this weekend, it's not worth updating it for a few hours here or there for this week. only really about downtime known in advance and time spans large enough to impact scheduling. For example, maybe don't put in an override for a 1-hour PM, but do it for an 8-hour maintenance event. Finite, on the other hand, respects the calendar changes the next time you run the finite engine. So keep that up to date all the time. Even little changes can make a difference there. So let's jump into Plex and look at the Work Center calendar. We're going to do this in UX because, again, it behaves the same way as Plex Classic. So I'm going to bring up my Work Center calendar for my Slitter 100. And you can see on here, this is, we have a green area here, which is where the shift is associated with the Work Center on the days that we're working. White are days that we're not working. And you can see I've got a shift override, a maintenance event on a Thursday. I'm going to scroll down a tiny bit so you can see my color coding down here. Shift overrides are a customizable setup table where you can tell Plex I'm working extra hours or fewer hours. So I've got a planned maintenance event here, which is going to consume some capacity, and then I put some excess capacity on a Saturday. Now let's take a look at next month. Once again, in the United States, we don't work on September 7th. It is a holiday, United States Labor Day. So let's make our system not work on Labor Day. Our shifts are Sunday night third shift, Monday all day, and Monday second shift. We'll get into shifts again on the next slide, but let's click on this date the 7th, and we're going to add a shift override. I'm going to tell the system, it defaults to say I'm going to start on this day at midnight and end on this day at midnight. Those of you who are doing the math realize this is zero downtime at all. I'm going to start this shutdown on the 6th, Sunday the 6th at 11 p.m. because that's when my third shift starts. And I'm going to end it on Monday at 11 p.m. because that is when my third shift comes back. So I've changed my start and stop time. Reporting adjustment says anything between midnight, 11 p.m. and midnight should be pushed to the next day. You can do before or after. I'm not making this change specific to shift, and I'm going to call this Labor Day. My override type is a holiday. And I'm going to tell the system we aren't working Labor Day. Now, the fun thing about these Work Center overrides is we can apply them just to a single work centers of type, or all work centers. I'm going to apply this to all because nobody's working on Labor Day for me and all buildings. This scenario, whoops, I'm sorry about that. The scenario button here is for finite scheduling. If you are a finite scheduling system, you would want to apply to all scenarios for finite. And you can see now that I've added the shift override. The month of September is telling me that I am not working on this day, and clearly I messed up my start time, but that's not necessarily germane to how we are doing our presentation for today. So let's talk about some shifts. When is the last time that you reviewed your shifts or your shift cycle? Do they reflect reality in your PCN? If they don't, take a peek at them because they need to be accurate. We've had clients that have either had to add or remove shifts to coronavirus, and those who have just grown in size over the years, but they never took the time to update shifts or cycles. And work center shifts, along with the calendar, can have a huge impact on your job scheduling, material availability, and capacity planning. Are you always finding yourself with materials arriving too late to be successful or arriving far sooner than they're really needed? Maybe your inventory turns have gotten a little out of control. Well, check your shifts in your work center calendar. A shift is the hours per day you work. Then those shifts are gathered together in shift cycles to create schedules. For example, first shift might be 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. But the first shift cycle would take that shift 7 to 3 and apply it Monday through Friday. The shift table is similar to the terms table in accounting, which is used by both accounts receivable and accounts payable. The shift cycles are used for both work centers and people. By the way, reports like the daily shift report and some other production report require that you have a shift set up for each operations person in order for the report to reflect accurate data. So check your employee list to make sure there's a shift associated with everyone, even if you don't use Plex time and attendance. Now back to the shifts for work centers. Let's pop back into Plex. And I'll show you where to set those. You can do it right from the Workcenter calendar, and it's the same in UX as Classic. We click on the Workcenter detail, and we've got a shift cycle down here under scheduling. I'm going to change this to a first only shift and click apply. And when I click my back button after it's applied, you'll notice that my downtime is still in the system, but my green time looks different. I went from having solid green, which is all 3 shifts, to only 1 green. So remember, for infinite scheduling, only jobs created after this change happen will respect those changes for the job update. The finite scheduler is going to pick them up the next time that you run the scheduler. The only way to get the infinite engine to change dates is by rescheduling them one by one. There is an idea out on the community exchange for a mass update button. Email me for the link because I'd love to see that developed if you're willing to upvote it. A little detail on the shifts and shift cycles in case you haven't set them up. We'll go into the shift cycles and shifts here. You can see in our system I have multiple shifts. I have a 7x24 and a first shift only. Those are the two that we just saw deployed. And when I click on this shift schedule here, let's go into first shift because it'll be more fun to change. I could add a second shift or a receiving shift or an SP1 shift to this to change the number of hours worked per day. So we have a shift list, which tells me what shifts I can pick up and apply to the shift cycle to get my schedule. All right, back to our PowerPoint. While this session is not intended to train you about the finite scheduling, if you are using the finite engine, there's one very important table to update at least annually. We had a client who was convinced that the finite engine didn't work, but it was because they hadn't updated their resource table in over 5 years. They had a welder level 3 resource associated with multiple parts, but there weren't any quantities defined for that resource. So the system just kept pushing the jobs out and wouldn't schedule. They thought Plex had a bug, but as it usually turns out, the problem was the data. Now, you would probably notice if you had 0 resources, but would you remember to update them when people move? 1 or 2 people get added to a resource or they move to a different position? If you lose or gain 1 press operator, you can significantly impact your scheduler for capacity, but only if Plex knows about it will it work. And just like the Workcenter calendar, we can put in overrides. Let's check those to make sure they're up to date. We'll do that by looking at my resource shift table. Take a few seconds to look at this and make sure that we really do have 4 first shift etch operators. And if you need overrides, we can look at those as well on the shift override. Make sure that these are set up and accurate, up to date. There are some quality things that we need to talk about as well. And look, I'm going to be real honest with everybody. I'm not a quality expert. I rely on my team to help me out. I always say nobody knows everything in Plex. So having said that, Ken Keller on my team graciously laid out the next few slides for me. So let's take a peek at what Ken has to share about expired supplier certs and enabling notifications for those so you can get ahead of the curve. Prepping for a new year is a great time to review and react to expiring supplier certifications in order to stay compliant and avoid audit findings. To manage this, use a report called the Supplier Certifications within Expiration Date Range report. Go out and run it for the upcoming calendar year date range and look at to see where you might have problems looming. This report will show all supplier certs expiring within your defined date range. This can prompt the responsible user in your organization to contact the supplier in order to receive the updated cert ahead of the due date. And we can actually even store actual cert copies that can be attached to the applicable cert right from this report. So let's take a peek at that report. Supplier certs with an expiration date, and see if we have any certs expiring this year. We do have one. Lagaki Foods is expiring November 7th. You'll notice that I don't have an attachment here. I look here and that paperclip is gray, but on my presentation it's black with a little number 1. That's how we tell that there's a cert in there. In Classic, of course, it looks similar, but instead of having a gray piece of paper with a paperclip, it has a yellow piece of paper with a paperclip. Plex has a great notification system, and letting your suppliers know their certs are out of date is important. The configuration is fairly straightforward, but I'm not going to dive too deep into that during this session. If you want more information on how to set this notification up, please email Jill, who sent you the link to this session today. She'll send you Ken's instructions on how to set up this notification. By the way, if your supplier is using the supplier portal in Plex, they can even upload their own certs. If you think you'd like us to run a session on best practices on supplier certificate management, email Jill. It's a sweet spot for Ken, and he does love to share. So let's take a look at that in here as well in UX. And here's our notification set up here. You can see we've got some tokens available, which are pretty nice. I've actually set up myself as a supplier in some of my PCNs, and I still get emails from them telling me that my cert's expired, although nobody cares about mine. So there you have it, sports fans. All right, thank goodness that's over. Now let's get back to something I'm a little more familiar with, accounting. Accounting is a safe zone for me. Okay, everybody try to stay awake. Every time I talk about accounting, people's eyes glaze over. But I promise you this is going to be over before you know it, so stay with me. It's just about getting ready for 2021, and I promise only a few minutes, and then we'll move on. If you are doing any memorized journal entries, you know that you set them up for a period of duration. And that's great if you're the person who set them up, but it's worth the time to take a peek and see if they are up to date and accurate, and that is very easy to do. So go to Memorize Journal Entries, click on Run, check out the period, start date, and end date, and see if they make sense. Let's take a quick look at here. We'll go to Memorize Journal Entries, and again, this is the same in Classic as it is in UX. You can see that I've got a journal entry here that's scheduled to start in July and end April 2022. You might want to consider setting those journal entries up now for next year for those periods. We also want you to look at allocations as well. So in here, we've got allocations set up for the year. Now imagine if you had allocated an expense based on departmental square footage and operations, and then ops relayed out the whole floor. All of your allocations would be wrong. Common allocations are things like square footage, head count, and those are pretty stagnant values. So to look at these allocations, go to the allocation screen, click on your allocation, and look at your accounts to button. This tells me right now that I'm allocating 35% to this account and 65% to another account. I can easily change these values here and click update. And as long as I use this allocation now, those numbers will be correct. I'm not going to get too deep into how allocations or memorized journal entries work. These are really sweet, but I promised you I wouldn't spend too much time in accounting. And for all of these items in accounting, remember single entity and multi-entity drivers are done in more than one place. And if you do use consolidated accounting, or if you use multi-entity accounting, you may have to do them in all your PCNs. So the other thing to consider is accounting jobs. Every year you should be closing your accounting jobs, and we want to look at setup tables for accounting jobs as well if you are using the accounting job auto numbering system. So I'm going to go to my accounting jobs, and again, this is one of the this is a module that it's called accounting jobs, but it's really not just about accounting. It's really project accounting. If you need to close any of these, make sure you take the time to close that and look at your auto numbering. I'm going to show you a cool feature in UX if you are not transitioned yet. When I go into setup table links here, Plex will give me a list of all the setup tables related to this and let me click right into them. You can see here that I've got auto numbering enabled, and I have 2020 CapEx accounting job set up. To add 2021 is pretty simple. I can simply add it here, make it active. And my accounting prefix job is accounting, prefix is accounting CE, and I can put my next number in. And once I apply, I've got that value available now. And when I create an accounting job of type 2021, it's going to get auto numbered with that, with those prefixes. The next thing we're going to talk about is automatically as periods and years. So closing the periods and years, it auto renews when you close the years. For example, closing the year 2020, if you have your years out to 2024, will automatically create periods and years for 2025. So it really doesn't technically need any maintenance. But did you know that you can control the automatic opening and closing of periods? You can do that. Although it requires annual maintenance, it's worth the time. Most people just auto open and auto soft close, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. And yes, I know that periods are designed to open when the first transaction of the month happens, but we've seen one or two oddball cases where there's a timeout issue that prevents the period from opening as planned. So we suggest that you use the data change scheduler to open the period automatically, then set up a soft close for the period on the first day of the following month. That'll make sure automatic transactions happen in the correct period. The data change scheduler is not limited to accounting. It can be used for more modules, but periods is the most common usage. So I'm going to focus on that. If you're using it for more modules, you're going to want to update annually for everything you use it for. If you don't know how to use it, it's pretty simple. So let's take a peek in both Classic and UX because they look drastically different. And it starts with security and setup. So we'll start in UX and we'll go to our periods. Oops, let's close down these sessions. Sorry about that. We're going to go to our fiscal periods and we're going to go to the year 2020 and click search. You can see here that my period is open and the display flag is on. This is my soft close when the flag is off. To set up a hard opening, I click on the period I want to impact, select status data change schedule, add, and I'm going to tell Plex, please open this period on September 1st. And I click OK, and when September 1st comes by, that period will automatically open. Again, people don't usually hard close. That's typically part of something your account will do manually. To soft close, we're going to change the display data change schedule flag here and say, add, we want to have it checked on September 1st, and we want to have it unchecked on October 1st. So that's how we soft close our periods automatically. You can see that was pretty easy. It's sort of painful to do, a little bit potsy, but once you're done, you're done. Let's look at the same thing in Classic. So I'm going to go back to, I made myself a little tiny menu here in Classic. Sorry, 2 more clicks and we'll be there, folks. My periods in Classic here, when I select 2020, if you have the data change scheduler enabled in Classic, you'll see a little tiny calendar right next to the period. When I click on this, I can tell Plex that I want to add an open record on September 1st. And that record will exist. Now, I'm in testing Classic and I was live in UX. That's why Classic didn't respect what I did in UX. If you are working on both platforms, when you change in one, it changes in the other. Back to timeouts. Oh, one warning too. If you're doing financial consolidation, you're going to need to do this in all your PCNs, and you might have to do it in consolidation periods and consolidation years, depending on your configuration. Okay, back to timeouts. I get it. They're annoying little gremlins, but they do happen, and they can happen to any software. Who knows why? We could consider conspiracy theories. It could be an internet outage from a car crash. It could be just employees tracking their brackets during March Madness with tons of internet traffic. Whatever happens to break the connection to Plex during the transaction, right, can cause a little drama. It's very rare, but if you do experience a timeout during the shipping process, it's possible that an invoice might not have been created. To see if this has happened, check your PCN for a VP report called Shippers Missing Invoices. It was specifically designed to identify those unusual conditions where you hit ship, but an invoice was not created as expected. So go ahead and run it, see if this has happened, and you can see on here there is a create man invoices right away. It's pretty simple. And keep in mind, this is very, very rare. In fact, I had to dig really hard through all of our PCNs to find one, but it could result in some lost revenue, and Plex knows that. So they built you a report to check this out periodically to make sure you don't lose out. So that might be something you want to check monthly, not annually. Okay, accounting is over. Everyone come back in and pay more attention. Although I promise I see a few accountants on this call, there will be things you care about as well. Everybody knows that putting in Plex and getting the data out there is a huge endeavor, but manufacturing is not set it and forget it. So you should be reviewing data annually too, just like your calendars. And here are a couple of good things to look at. How accurate are your process routing rates for pieces per hour, setup, crew? That's pretty easy for accountants to see when they analyze variances monthly, but sometimes it's tougher for ops. So reports like the daily shifts in UX, or AKA daily shift report in Classic, they can really help out. Run the daily shift report to check out efficiency. Are you making parts far faster or far slower than expected? Well, that blows results all the way from production to profitability, and it can even impact forward-thinking quoting. So take some time to look at these to see if it's time to update your process routings with more accurate data. In UX, I'm going to bring up the daily shifts. And I want to remind everybody, when you do run this, make sure you select a labor rate and a work center rate of standard. The most common question we get about this report is, why are all my efficiency and utilization numbers 0? There are a lot of zeros on our PCN because we use our PCN for testing, and there's rarely accurate data in our PCN. It's just run a quick test. So if you're running this and you're always seeing efficiency and utilization at 0 and 100, make sure that you have checked those values. Another report to check is the rolling average rate report. So let's take a look at that. The rolling average rate report allows you to look at a period of time and compare actual performance from actual logins to setup time and run time by part. Now, there is a very dangerous button on here that I have hidden. It allows you to update your standard rates with the actual results from this report. Be very careful with this. Trusting that really means that you believe your operators have excellent discipline, they've logged in the way they should, they've done setup time the way that they should. You can see on here I've got update process routing visible here in flags. You're going to want to hide that. I have hidden it in the Classic version. It's not hidden in the UX version. It's a very dangerous button. And once again, you're going to want to make sure that anytime you update your process routings, you work with accounting. I wish we had time to go through each one of these reports in details, but if you are more interested in how these reports work, let me know. We have a handout that we give at PowerPlex every year that talks about them. Another great thing to look at is, did you know that you can configure Plex to automatically track excess setup time? For example, if you have a part that should take 15 minutes of setup and your operator's in setup for more than that, the system can automatically switch over to a different work center status. This is an awesome tool in a couple ways. First, if you're looking at the production status report, which shows you what's happening in real time, you can address excess setup immediately when it happens. Or you can also look in the work center log to view the parts and operators that frequently end up in that status. This is helpful for showing you where you might need more operator training or to update a process routing. Now look, if it's just a minute or two, that's probably no big deal. It could be the operator forgetting to switch from setup to production. This is a great tickler for everybody. So let's take a look at the excess setup table here in UX. Again, it looks just like Classic. So don't be disappointed if you're using Classic. Everything works the same. I'm going to click on this setup table that I named, or this work center status that I named excess setup. And if we deploy this flag here, the system will automatically go into this once the setup time from the process routing has been exceeded. Now, using these tools, if you decide that you're ready to update your part data to be more reflective of reality and you want to know how to leverage Plex uploads to do it, let me know. We've developed a great document that we're happy to share that will tell you what can and cannot be updated with an upload. And always, 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 don't update part routing data without talking to your accounting team first. As you know, if you're using Plex standard costing, routing changes can cause balance sheet drama. Nobody likes accounting drama. Nobody likes to be interested in accounting. So make sure you work with them in tandem. Everybody's going to be happy. One more shameless plug for the planning engine. Take a little time to look at the MRP diagnostics report and clean up old junk. Number one accuracy killer in Plex is old data that hangs around, and it can drive demand for raw materials, can consume capacity, or just cause chaos. I'm going to take a peek at this in both Plex Classic and Plex UX. We'll start in Classic. The report looks a little bit different. It's in a way, some ways it's a little bit easier to see. The system will tell you if you have problems, for example, active and unused parts. If you're using Plex part replication, this is probably going to be bigger than usual, simply because you may have part records in your system that are pertinent to other PCNs and not yours. Don't worry about that. This is a huge problem, active parts with multiple material ops. That means we're double driving material in here. Here's parts without routings, etc. There's a lot of good information in here. And here's how it looks in UX. We'll go to our little folder here and MRP diagnostics. And here it looks just a little different. The layout is the same information. The layout is just a little bit different. Finally, take a moment to look at your legalese wherever it exists. So things like purchase orders and sales orders that have your terms and conditions on them, that's pretty obvious. AR invoice, remittance, and order acknowledgements. But even if you're running the employee suggestion system, there might be things in there to check. I have one client who uses employee suggestions, and they have a warning out there that whatever an employee suggests is the legal property of their company. Well, when they were purchased, we had to update that to change the company name. So we're going to go to the places in Plex where we can see where we have to make changes. And by the way, you might have to contact your attorney depending on the changes that you're going to make. I'm seeing more and more of our clients use phraseology like, hey, check our website for terms and conditions, and then they just include the URL in them in the Plex documentation. Maybe that'll work for you, and that means you only have to change things in one place. So a few places to look for these are in the verbiage module. Again, same in Classic as in UX. Also, the report header setup, again, same in Classic as UX. Another area to look is purchase order clauses. Some older PCNs have this listed as PO notes, or you may have changed it to PO notes. And the same thing for quote clauses. And again, things like the employee suggestion system, those are actually built within settings. All right, next up, security. There's really nothing official here. Plex doesn't need you to do anything to manage annual security, but this is like changing the batteries on your smoke alarm. It just makes good sense to take a peek at things, maybe once or twice a year, to see if anything fell through the cracks. We can't forget to give security the love. A light and simple dose of love and security could be about 5 of these sessions, but maybe it should be 5 or 6 sessions on security. But for now, let's review some of the things that are easy to overlook. Go to your employee list, user manager, and external manager regularly to see who has access to your system. And if they shouldn't have access, take them out, deactivate them. Why risk leaving access available to somebody who doesn't need it? Or worse yet, leaving access open for a terminated employee who might be able to cause harm to you. So let's take look at a few reports in Plex. We're going to look at them in UX. The first thing we're going to look at is the employees. And again, this is one where in Classic it's called employee list. In UX, it's called employees. And when I click the search button, I'll see the list of all my employees here that are live and active employees in your system. You'll see I have a couple of test employees. We use those to validate security. I would always check those to make sure they're still real. Also, head out to User Manager. You might also have to do this in IAM as well. But User Manager in Classic, if you're not converted to IAM, User Manager in Classic and UX will tell you who has access to your system and when the last time they logged in. You'll see that all 3 of these are grayed out, so they can't be used. But in here, we can see that we have a supplier code and a customer code. We can tell what suppliers have access to our systems. And I'm going to change to a different position here so we can see only internal people. Take a look at this and see if these people are still able to have access to your system. we can click in Kevin Pope's record here, and I can look at his login history, and this will tell me when the last time Kevin has logged in within this date range. And he's obviously a pretty active user in our system, and one of my favorite guys in the world. So, so let's also look into one other screen, which is External User Manager. The External User Manager is a list of other Plex clients who have access to your company. People who have Plex IDs, but they have access to your system for different reasons. A great example is if you're a customer of ours, you'll grant us external access. External User Manager shows all the people who don't work for you who are in the system. I obviously am protecting a lot of my clients. We give all of our clients access to this, so I've limited it just to another ID that I have because I don't want to share my other customer names. You want to go in here, and if you're not working with a partner anymore or not working with a customer address, then you'll want to take it out of here. Another useful report is login history. You can see in your login history who has been using your system and when they've logged in. So we can see this is only set for today, who's logged in so far today. Finally, one that we're going to talk about here is permissions outside of roles. If you're using Classic and you're planning on cutting over to UX, or you just want to clean up security, as long as you're working on this, check out a VP screen called User Permissions Granted Outside of Roles. Even if you aren't thinking about converting, this is just a good security measure in general. I'm going to show you this in Classic because it's not pertinent in UX. UX does not allow the giving roles directly to people. They must go through, the security people must go through a role. So your goal should be to get rid of these that are all added directly to a user, put them in roles, and then assign those roles to people who need them. All right, we've covered a ton of material, didn't we? And there are a lot more things. For example, expiring customer prices or expiring supplier prices. The challenge here is that there are so many ways to set up pricing, and they're so unique to each configuration and business model, we'd never be able to cover it all in the same session as annual maintenance. So perhaps a gentle reminder to your teams to check their buying or selling prices for expiration dates is in order. For customer pricing, check customer orders, customer master pricing, catalog pricing. For purchasing, check PO pricing or supplier master pricing. And for those of you cost accountants on the call, if you're using supplier master pricing as part of your cost algorithm, then having only expired pricing might lead to a drop in inventory in your balance sheet when you recalc. So once again, accounting cares about those prices. If you think that a session on looking for expired prices for customer orders is a good idea, or supplier orders is a good idea, email me and I'll add it to the list. I wish we could have covered it today, but we've got about 10 minutes left and we just didn't have time. There was so much to cover. So let's open up the floor to questions. I didn't see anything in the chat. Please share anything that I missed if there's anything that you do to prepare for future years.
Yeah, Patty, I'm just going to say that this was, I was going to put in the chat, but I was going to say this is really a lot in a short period of time, and you've done a great job on this. Obviously, much of this you get much more into detail in each one of these, and I've had to work with all the calendars and everything, so I'm pretty familiar with it, both in UX and Classic. Although I don't do any of it in Classic anymore, but yeah, you did a great job on this, and thank you.
Thank you, Ross. Any other questions?
Patty, this is Mark Dion. I was wondering if you could quickly show us where we might find supplier master pricing. It's a term I hadn't heard before. No problem.
So in supplier master prices, it's very powerful. It takes a little bit to set up. It can even bring in CRU. So if you have commodity pricing, so I pay a base on flour, but if it's going to be, you know, it has a different price based on how it's packaged or something, you can set that up. You can see here that we've got breakpoints for quantities, effective and expired dates, and then the prices are built up together based on price components that you set up. So ours is set up for steel. We have a base and a surcharge and an import charge. So it's pretty powerful.
So does this automatically get pulled into the purchase order?
It does, and it can get pulled into your cost algorithm.
Okay. Okay, good to know.
Thanks, Mark. If you think we should do a session on supplier master pricing or customer master pricing, email Jill. So thanks, everybody. I'm very grateful for you spending time with me today. Between summer and client activity due to COVID, we're busier than ever, and you're so important to us. We're really enjoying our opportunity to meet with you and share what we know. We're going to switch to bi-weekly delivery of these sessions to give my team a little bit more time to devote to our great clients. Our next session is going to be put on by Veronica Meyer. She's going to talk about ways to get information out of Plex when there's no export or download button. She's going to also cover how to enable download and export buttons in Vision Plex screen and tell you why sometimes the export buttons don't work even if they're visible. One of the most frequent comments we get from folks who are convinced they can't get their financial statements out of Plex and into Excel so they can change formatting. Well, guess what? You can, but it's not really well known, and we're here to change that. I hope to see you then. Watch your email for more details, and thank you so much for joining us today. Remember our YouTube channel. Give us a thumbs up if you can for any of these sessions. If you can't attend because you're too busy, just check out our YouTube channel. You won't be able to ask questions, but you can listen in. So have a great day, everybody, and stay safe. Thanks.